Hey, welcome to the Sequential Artists Workshop Pro Calls. Every week we ask another creator, another graphic novelist to come sit down with us and tell us where they came from, what were the first things they made, what did they make recently, how did they do it, what are they thinking about now, how are they going to move forward, how do they keep going, all those things, career things, art things, feeling things, creative things. Every month it's a new creator, new challenges, new stories. Come check it out. Come sit down with us. You can sit down live for some of these calls by being a member of our groups. You can find us at learn.sawcomics.org. Come check it out. Come be a graphic novelist with us. Come join us on the socials. Sometimes it's Comics Workshop, sometimes it's Saw Comics. Either way, come check us out and welcome. Sure, welcome. So we do this thing monthly where we have people on, cartoonists, and we ask them like how they got to where they are and what they've been doing, but especially like we love to know what your journey was like, and you first got inklings to make comics, and
Yeah.
what frustrations you've had and what struggles you've had and how you and especially what you just did and maybe even what you're doing. So I thought we could do that. I'll take
Sure.
this from you if you like. Otherwise, I have a list of questions and a handful of slides and stuff. But
Sure.
then
Yeah.
start.
Yeah, let's go ahead and start. Again,
Okay.
my apologies for running late, but hello everyone. I'm Yasmeen. I'll sort of run you through my journey and Tom will help. And I love your background, Tom. But yeah, you'll sort of see that I have a very roundabout way in getting into comics and have done a million things and then have sort of ended up on comics. So yeah, I'm happy to do this sort of journey with you, especially with this book, because I've been working with these same two characters for around, I did the math, I think it's like 8, 9 years. So this book I've been working on actively for 1 year, but has been in the background for about that long. So
That's
yeah.
super awesome. I will say, as just a kind of a tangent, you're definitely the only cartoonist we've had on here who we also own a rug by.
Oh yeah, I love that you have that.
Yeah, I'll scare up a picture of that. So what do you mean that you've been working on these characters 8 or 9 years?
Yeah, so I actually, do you mind if I screen share? Maybe that
That'd
would
be
be
awesome. That'd be great.
okay. I'm gonna share my screen and then I'm just gonna go ahead and just share my whole desktop just because I'm going to be going into preview.
There's that
So
rug.
there is the rug. That is the rug right there. This one right here is the one that is at Saw. Um, so I actually pulled a bunch of images from like really old times of just looking at how long I've been working on these characters. So before I go into like, I guess my journey, I just wanted to talk about, so the character, the pomegranate character, their name is Anar, and which means pomegranate in Farsi. But I pulled a bunch of images from basically 2016 to 2019 of me just obsessively drawing this character, and this woman character who I've named Goli, which just means flower. Um, so can you guys see these okay? Just want to
Yeah,
make
that look
sure.
great.
Okay, yeah. So it was actually really fun to pull these because a lot of the sort of imagery that I have is really reminiscent to what I continue to do, but it just came in spurts. Like I would have sort of, again, it kind of came with this pomegranate character first, and then I just would obsessively sketch these two together. Um, Without like the very clearest of narrative in mind, but I enjoyed the sort of, I guess, intricacies of like these two characters and their relation with each other. So yeah, I think, I wonder which one's the oldest, but probably these. The one of the comics, these are the oldest, but the comic that one of the comics in the book named Rotten is like my first comic I ever made. I made it in 2016, and I actually pulled those that I can show really quickly. These are the really, really old pages. from 2016. So I made this character for this comic, and it was my first time making a comic. I had no experience, no guidance, no nothing, just a desire to tell a story. And
Wait,
looking, oh yeah,
if
go
you
ahead.
had no experience and no guidance, who were you and where were you at this point? What
Yeah,
age?
who was I?
Yeah, who are you?
I was, yeah. I was in college. So when I went into college, I studied psychology and Middle Eastern studies. So I was always someone who drew. I loved comics. I loved stories. I was really influenced by like Calvin and Hobbes. I loved cartoons like Invader Zim. Cartooning was a big part of my life, but it wasn't something I was doing professionally. I would just doodle a lot. But then I became really obsessed with this idea of desire and the idea of desire that's not allowed or permissible. And so I created this narrative with the story. And so I just like, remember it just like beamed into my head, and I obsessively was like, I just sketched everything out and then just like made this. And even looking back at it now, like as someone who guess makes more comics and has more experience in it, I'm kind of like, wow, I was doing a bunch of funky, weird things before I knew the rules. Like
Mhm.
that I have this weird like flower thing become a hand and go into here. Just stuff like that. So yeah, to give you some context of like who these characters are, it's just sort of like something I've had in the background for a long time and drawing and obsessing over. And I think about three of the comics in the book are redraws of old comics, rewriting them, reorienting them for sure. But there's still like if you look at this one and look at like I can show you. So like if we look at this page and then look at this page, they're the same page in some ways, but I've like kind of moved and contorted things around. Um,
I,
so
looking around, I found 3 versions of Rotten, actually. Does that seem right?
yeah, so there actually was, you are very correct. This is another one.
There we go. Okay.
And when I was in grad school, I revisited it again and redrew it. And I was like, so yes, you're right. So it was like here, and then I redrew it in 2019. So this was originally made in 2016, redrew in 2019, and then redrawn for the book in 2020. I actually finished the book in this year, so 2024. So just same ideas, but like I kept revisiting them. And this comic in particular, I have like a big soft spot for because it was my first comic ever. And there was something so, as I said, weird about it. Like I did a bunch of weird things that I wanted to maintain that energy with it. And it was really hard because I broke so many rules that I didn't even know existed. And now I know the rules. So it's hard to like be like, okay, how do I, you know? So trying to keep that energy
Are
in
you
there.
saying it's meant to be as free and rule breaky now?
I feel like it has aspects of it, but because I think so much about comics now, I teach comics, like I think about so many things like panel sizes, visibility, layout, structure. Like these are things that I'm really actively thinking about way more than I ever did when I made this. Like I was just throwing things on the page, and there's just some stuff about this that I never will be able to achieve ever again. And I had to live with that when making and redrawing. That there's something about the older thing that I'll always never be able to do. Um, but it's okay. Yeah. So that gives you some history of like how long I've been kind of festering on these things for a bit.
Yeah, it's wild that you've done this story 3 times now.
I think this is the last time. I think it is. I'm done with these characters. This book
Until
was my goodbye.
until you turn it like an opera or something.
I hope I'm done.
All right, I didn't mean to derail you. Do you want to tell us
No,
more
no, no,
about
no. Yeah, I didn't mean to derail your question, but I was like, oh, I can show some visual examples. But yeah, I'm happy to can keep going in terms of questions you have.
well, I was doing a little searching. So tell us early on like what you were how you said Calvin and Hobbes was inspiring early on,
Yeah.
and I forgot what else you said. Oh, Invader Zim. So
Mhm.
uh so you were reading some comics, but you weren't making comics, you're just doodling I assume you're a kid, a teenager or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah, so I was like a big doodler. I love to read comics. So I would go like one of my favorite things, and let me pause my sharing. But I loved going to the library and just sitting down and like grabbing a manga or a comic and just reading the whole thing. Like I just would consume it, and it would just be this transformative process where it just you get stuck in it. And I think that's the thing that all of us who want to make comics love, that feeling of just picking a book up and you're totally transfixed and you're in that book. And that was like big part of my childhood and the things that I loved. I loved cartoons. Again, like I was drawing obsessively, but there was no person in my life who was like, if you want to make a comic, this is how you do it. Or if you want to make a cartoon, this is how you do it. So I didn't necessarily know how to do those things. I didn't know that that was an option, right? And I also had this mentality that I think a lot of people when they're starting out, or even when they're making comics, is like, well, I don't know enough, or I need to do this to do that. Rather than just being like, there's a story and there's something I really want to share with the world and I'm going to make it, right? There's a lot of barriers that we create for ourselves and also the world creates for ourselves. Like, like there's so many ways in which who are the types of people who were making comics when I was growing up? It wasn't people like me. I didn't have someone that I could look at besides like Marjan Satrapi of like another like Middle Eastern comics art person. So it just felt not something within my ballpark. And then I went into school and I loved school. I loved learning. I loved just consuming knowledge about like the way that like psychology was really informative to my practice. Like I wasn't learning like Lacan or Freud. I was learning very much like how the brain worked, neuroscience, like how the brain operated and how vision works, how we understand things in our mind. And I was also in tandem with that, learning a lot about like Middle Eastern history and culture. And that just became really important for me down the line because it informed what I was interested in and what I wanted to say and what I wanted to do.
Um, I'm going to ask you to, I think we wanted you to stop sharing, right? You said,
Yeah.
I'm of the screen. Can we get you?
Oh yeah. Do you want me to continue sharing? Did
No,
I?
no. Well, you said I'm going to stop sharing, and then, but now we're all just staring at your file folder, and I think people
Oh,
are open.
my
Although we can
biggest.
go back to it. Also,
No, it's all good. Let
but
me.
also in the chat, somebody's like, I want to see those rugs, so maybe we can show those in
Sure,
here,
sure. Yeah. Let me go
but
back to screen.
or whenever. Um,
Sure.
but so you, oh, there we go. We'll just go
Sorry
ahead.
about that. I pressed pause screen share, but I don't know if it paused it.
Work.
But
There
anyways.
you go, Leone, in the chat. You can see the rugs now, and you can also go to the website. Um, that was mentioned in an interview I read with you, and you just mentioned it now about psychology and how the brain works and things like that, and it sounds like that was pretty immediate, like how it affected what you were thinking about art. Am I right about that? Yeah?
Yeah, totally.
'Cause
Yeah.
this is undergrad, and you weren't making art at that time, or were you?
I was again obsessively doodling like
Uh-huh.
all the time. Like in my all those little things I showed you at the beginning from like 2016 to 2018 are my
Mm.
notes. Like in class, I was just
Oh,
always doodling. But again, I wasn't like sitting down and being like, it's art time. I'm gonna make a painting or I'm gonna make a thing, and I have a thing. I definitely like engaged with the online world of the arts. Like I would go on like DeviantArt when I was 13 and post my silly drawings and stuff like that. But I wasn't necessarily, again, like having a committed art practice. But to go back to what you said about psychology, I thought a lot about how the brain processes images and how images can affect our biases. I did a thesis in psychology. Like I did a study with like 100 undergrads where I was looking at how we can change implicit biases that people can have through image matching, like showing the face of a certain person and then showing a negative or positive stimuli and seeing if it can affect
Mhm.
implicit biases. That was something that I studied and did. So it's like it's funny because it was such a big part of my life that doesn't show up actively with what I do now, but it informed a lot of how I am as a person and how I, even as an art person, like keeping myself really organized with the schedule and all of these things that kind of came from doing research. But I don't know if you'd see it if you read my comic.
Well,
but,
what you just described, not to be too glib about it, but you just described comics in a way where you have one image and then another image, and what you're really trying to do is create a story in the mind, right? Hopefully not one with a lot of bad implicit biases or whatever, but do you think that way when you're making comics?
I don't know if I think exactly like that, but what came up for me when you were saying that is I think a lot about seeing and sort of what's shown and what's said. It's something I say with my students a lot, where it's when you read a comic, right? We're reading and we're seeing. And those things are doing a little bit of a dance together. And as the person creating this like this dance, right? We have control of what is being like visually seen and what is being read. And I think that we can think of some comics that have this really amazing connection where something is being shown to us, but nothing is being spoken, right? Like, let's say if we have a comic where someone is going through the most awful day of their life, if we see them in their forlorn expression, going to the bus, sitting there quietly, going home, and just collapsing in bed, that can say way more than being like, I had the worst day of my life, right? I think about that a lot, where these comics that really stick with you are the ones that make you feel more of reality than reality is sometimes, you know? I think that's what really good art making does, is it sort of really puts you in that moment. So I think about, again, like showing and reading, like this is the big thing in comics. And I'm all for playing around with that stuff. And that could be, as you said, based off what I was into as a researcher, I guess.
Is there anything in When to Pick a Pomegranate that might be a good example of that? Because I could pull up the PDF and we can show the people some more. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah.
It's so wonderful, and I want them to experience some of it. Oh, also we should put a link to buy it in the chat.
Sure.
So if you have that, you do that while I share my screen.
Here, let me stop sharing my screen and then I can pull that up.
Okay. And meanwhile, I'll go all the way to the beginning because I want to get to the table of contents. Oh, I thought there was a table of contents. There's not. But if there's anything in particular, Yasmeen, I'll go to 2 pages that is an example of what you just described, of maybe the visuals taking. It's a very visceral book. You know, there's so much that's. Oh, hang on a second.
I like that you can put 2 together.
Yeah. So I'd love to hear honestly, I'd love to hear what you were thinking about particular passages, any passage, because there's so much going that's so interesting. But if you want to stop me at a particular one or bring one up.
Yeah, maybe you could go back to the green one, the one that's called propagation.
Or here.
I guess in this PDF, it doesn't work like that, but if you go to it's supposed to be the spread where she's ripping off their arm.
Oh gosh, is it out of, let me see if I can whack.
I wonder if you could like add a page. It could be just
I was going to delete a page.
Yeah, you can go ahead and like delete the covers.
All right, now let's see if it does 2 pages. Isn't that interesting? There must be an extra somewhere. Oh yeah, this looks more right.
Yeah, I think so. If you go to
that.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I think this would be an example of what I was describing, where it's like, I could write, and then she ripped my arm off and I died in agony, right? Right? Or being like, oh my God, this is awful, right? Or we could get a reaction from this character. But I wanted to pull the moment, literally, of like the extreme amount of pain that losing a part of yourself would cause you, right? Because this comic is supposed to be sort of like a relation to losing maybe a part of yourself and not having agency of that, right? And I wanted to show how that feels through the actual act of this arm being ripped off, and also the reaction of that, and then pulling out to the like disgusting visceral thing that's happening to this character.
Yeah.
Right. So I think it's like I told you in the previous page what's going to happen because the characters are talking. There's actual like context, but then in the middle, I'm going to show you that, right?
Mm.
It's just like, again, it's not to say that things are redundant if you show and tell, because we do need to do some showing and telling in comics. We do need to give people words and context for things. You can't just be like, just show, right?
Mm.
But I think the moments in comics that stick with me the most are when there's just something like that is so disorienting or confusing, and you're like, what is this? Or you feel it. Yeah, I think that would be an example. And then
It's a
the
great moment too. Oh, sorry.
I know, I appreciate it. Thank you.
There's such a setup and there's so much suspense because she's sort of like really slowly pulling on that arm. But I
Mhm.
and the, and then that double page spread. But the amazing thing to me was like I didn't expect it to look like that. But
Mhm.
and when it did, it made some sense because it's plant material, I suppose, or something like
Yeah.
that. And it wasn't just anyway. And also, your cartooning is so amazing and funny sometimes. Like that character is also really fun to look at, and but the pain is real. And then there's this like natural, these natural fibers here that are there. And it's just a great moment. But anyway, go ahead.
No, I appreciate it. I think another one that I think would be an example of that is Ripe, which I think is like right after this one.
This one, right? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so this one also is like an older comic that I redrew a lot of the pages. And once we go through this, I can show the older pages. I did these in grad school, not these ones, I redrew these for the book, but this one was very much thinking about Persian poetry and like poetic timing. And then I wanted it to be like that the images really, it's like image, text, image, text, image, text. So I was trying to think a lot about what text goes with what image. And does the text already describe what's happening? Then, like, why would I draw it? Right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I could say, for example, when it comes to like my soft, gooey center, I could show this person with like a gooey center, right? Like
Right.
literally. Or I
Right.
could show a pomegranate like oozing. But then I wanted to think about like, well, shouldn't the image be evocative of something, of that feeling or the emotion or something else, so that the image and the text are doing this sort of similar thing, but not redundant.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, I thought about that a lot because again, I was like, well, why is there images and why is there words? Right? Like, could these things exist without each other? I don't think so because I kind of worked it out to be that way, but I think about that again a lot with myself. I try not to have this brain when I'm reading another person's comic to be like, why did they have to draw this picture?
Uh-huh.
Because I really try to be fully in the thing. But it sometimes comes out. It's like, well, you already showed me that thing. Why are you telling me it? You know?
Yeah.
Um,
The opposite can happen. This page stopped me for a moment in a good way on this panel where it says a blush the hue of gold, and my brain was like, "That's not gold." And then I was like, "Whoa!" And then, wait,
that's good.
What else is going on in this page that I might have missed? And I actually went back and reread these two pages. And I was like, "Oh, this is so much more. It's so much more alive and full than I thought." Because part of my brain was thinking, "Oh, words, pictures, they're just sort of matching," and then I realized it's a lot more. It's a lot more alive than that.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, and then like I also thought a lot about this one with like the words trying to feel stronger, that they have their own beauty to them.
Hmm.
And I use a lot of words that are used in Persian poetry, like moonlight, like these things that in Farsi are very beautiful. They're obviously very, like, the word moonlight is a very beautiful word in English, but in Farsi, it's mahtab, which is like, I don't know, it has a certain history and beauty, and I I use sort of these weird words for that reason. I think on like the next page, I describe the character as silver-bodied,
Yeah.
which is, again, another weird word that comes often in, you see English translations of Persian poetry. And I love that word. I always thought of it as this like, it didn't have like a direct meaning because I'm like, what does silver-bodied mean? Is it someone who glistens? Is it something like a fish that when you pick it up in the sunlight, it has this iridescent quality to it? Does it mean someone is like a statue? Like there's so much multiplicity in that word. So yeah, I did think a lot about words. And then with the images, like, do they work with each other? Do they oppose each other? Kind of like the experience you had, which is great. Like there isn't gold in that panel intentionally, right? It's like a
Right.
blush that is reminiscent of gold. So, yeah.
Silver bodied stopped me when I read it too, because I was like, well, first of all, it's a great phrase, and it does strike you as beautiful and emanating some sort of, you know, glistening or something. But she's sitting on this pedestal lactating, and I was like, I don't think silver bodied means lactating. And then I was like, well, I don't know what it means, so I'll just keep going. But I was enjoying it so much, you know.
I love
And
that, Tom. Thank you.
also that prior page, the one on the left, is amazing. That's a really, really powerful moment.
Thank
Um,
you.
it's this rending that sort of happens. Anyway, that's great.
Appreciate
Yeah, this
it.
is a really great passage, this whole section. I think that's the end
Oh,
of it.
I'm looking at the chat. I finally was able to. I see that Mahor was saying, is it Simin Bar? I'm sure it is. But I'm only really familiar with the word in the English translation of Farsi because I cannot read. I can read Farsi, but I cannot read poetic Farsi. I wish I could because it's so above me and so beautiful, but I'm sure it is. But yeah.
Well,
Yeah. This one, if you want, I could show you the older pages. I don't want to derail.
certainly. No, no, I'm just sort of like going around in a random way. I've actually got some older pages I want to ask you about too, but I'll stop sharing if you
Sure.
want to show us some of the newer ones
Sure.
or the older ones of Ripe.
Yeah, let me share my desktop again. And then,
Oh, there's the URL to buy it.
oh yeah, I linked it in the
I'll put it right.
dropped in the chat. So yeah, this one I guess would be my second official comic. So the older pages were screen printed. I did them in grad school and they look like this. So
Hmm.
this is the risograph of it. I risographed it as well. I didn't risograph it. I had it risographed by my friend Sana back in the day, but that's it before and then after it became like this, right?
Any
Uh,
chance you can put those side by side?
let's see if I can.
I bet you can.
I don't
What
know.
is what does back in the day mean? Was that a particular kind of day, or was that just mean when you said like I had a risograph back in the day? I don't know if that's
Yeah, so sure, of course, very good question. So I screen printed these in grad school in 2019, and then I had them risographed like a month later, I think. So all in 2019. I don't know if that's visible for everyone, but that's sort of like the before and after. And
Hmm.
when I was looking, I found my original thumbs of this page that I'll pull up really quickly too, so you can kind of see
Oh,
uh, what I was thinking about.
this is from
Uh,
2019 or whatever.
no, so my history was wrong when I was looking into this. I had originally thought I had drafted this in 2019, but I forgot. I wrote this in 2017 and I thumbed it in 2017, and then I finally committed to doing the thing later. So here, let me pull this up too. I was like, what? Did not remember that at all. So here is like the original thumb that I did in 2017. And then I benched it. And then in grad school in 2019, I did it, which was this page. And then, like a crazy person, I came back in 2024. I redrew it. So yeah, I've been revisiting this sort of same ideas for a long time. And again, I went through it a bit quickly, but oops. I, again, have all these, I actually hand wrote this poem, totally
Mm.
thought I notes apped it because I found the notes app of 2019. And I, again, revisiting this for this call, I was like, oh my God, I actually did write this in 2017. And you can kind of see like visually, there's like, there's the same kind of weird stuff that I do comes up a lot still. Like, again, really rough, but I had different ideas at the time, and I couldn't tell you again what I was thinking back then, but these were sort of like, these are how rough my thumbs were. But I remember like I wanted this drawing of like someone coming out of a flower. Like I can see parts of where I was thinking of stuff uh coming to be. So yeah, I wanted to show these because I found these and I was like, I don't even know my own history because I really thought it was just grad school. And then I revisited these and I was like, oh my God, no, I wrote this way earlier. So
You have one of those finishes of the woman coming out of the flower like you just showed us in the sketch.
mhm.
Sure, I could
Yeah,
find it.
I do. Let me see if I pulled that one. Doo-doo-doo. I don't think I did, but I think you showed it in a previously when I was looking at the page. I can stop sharing if you wanted to,
Keep
but
sharing. I want to ask you another couple of questions since you have some
sure,
stuff.
sure,
Can let's see, move the file folder window away. Yeah,
sure.
and you can slide right. Yeah, that'll be good. Actually, this is good. Yeah, I just like let's take a look at the. I just maybe I'm getting too in the weeds with certain questions, but they're so similar and so different, and I want to know what you were thinking. Like, for instance, panel 3, she's in profile. Panel in the first version, she's not in the second version. Also, the style changes quite a lot. It's more stylized and more flat in the first version. I
Hmm.
don't know. What kind of things are you noticing, or what kinds of things were you trying to change actively, and what kind of things happened accidentally and stuff?
Yeah, so this was again like when I was doing this, redrawing it. Um, Here's the thing, people have asked me like, do you suggest redrawing old pages? And I don't know what the answer is because every time I was redrawing an old page, I was like, wow, the old one has this like energy that I can't do again. Because again, I'm thinking about so many things of like the one, the 180 rule and like is the character positioned correctly? And
Oh,
like I think about these things way too much now.
oh,
And there's something that's because again, you see like she's reaching up and then suddenly she's flipped around. And that would be something that I'd be like,
uh-huh.
around because it changes the flow, right?
Hmm.
Right. So anyway, that's a big like a little me ranting for a second. But again, there's something that I have in the older pages that I was never able to, I can never do again because I'm not that person anymore. But I I wanted the newer pages that I redrew, of anything, to be a beefed up version of the intention I had. I really wanted this comic to feel ambiguous of what the voice at the bottom, which character is it coming from? Because it sort of describes her, but it also describes the pomegranate. So at the end, it kind of becomes hopefully clear that the character that's speaking is the pomegranate desiring her, right, to be consumed, rather than the other way around. But all we're seeing actually is like her grabbing this thing and eating it, which is really all that's happening. But there's this like pulling of that moment through all of this sort of like desiring one another.
Hmm.
But yeah, I wanted it to feel clear that there's this like the original page where she's just reaching up just feels too easy. I wanted it to feel strenuous that she's like really trying to grab this thing and she grabs it that I wasn't able to do back then, to have that feeling of like, okay, I've grabbed the thing. This one just feels like, yay, I've grabbed my little object, you know? So there are ways that the new page, I'm like, yeah, I like that there's um, that there. Um, and I also wanted it to feel like the last panel, sorry, where the face is sort of more revealed, to be more of a moment. That
Uh-huh.
the original page kind of cuts it off awkwardly. Like it feels awkward that it's that close. And so I wanted the context of the hand and the pomegranate there too. So some of the knowledge I've gained helps the story because I've understand like storytelling rules of like how to place characters, how to tell a story, how to be clear. But there is a certain energy, as you said, stylization in my older pages that I miss sometimes. But then I also look about how I drew bodies too, that I feel like I draw bodies in a better way now. I feel more like, I don't know, they're less like a woman like looking in a certain way where it like feels like more like a normal person. Um, so yeah, those are some things that
Um,
happened with me redrawing this one. And honestly, most of them redrawing it was just
I'll share my screen in a moment too, because I think your figure drawing in the book is so beautiful and so so genuine in so many ways. I actually wanted to point that out, and not that there's much to ask about. It's just really great. But might as well. Was there ever a point where you thought, I'll just reprint the old one? I'll reprint the old story? Oh, there was.
yeah. When I was doing this one, right?
Hmm.
Because I really like the old one. I was just like, maybe I should keep it. Then I was like, no, my art style is so different now. It would look really weird. So I was like, I kept pulling through because I wanted the whole comic to feel it had a through line. Because every comic is so different visually. Like the character, it's the same two characters, but the visuals, so many things are being disorienting that I can't imagine the old drawings to be another layer of disorienting. So I did power through. I was like, I have to, because this might just be me. I have a nostalgia for like Yasmeen from 2019, right? It could just be that. But yeah.
Um, there's some great, there's just so much to look at. Some of the great figure drawing. These are photographs, aren't they? These hands.
Yeah, that's my hand.
That's pretty cool. Yeah, there's some really nice, almost collage work, or literally collage work in some places. Um, I guess one of the, like that figure, there's a lot of just great figures in here. When the woman's, yeah, all of the one where there's a full figure are really wonderful. That one is really, really alive and genuine and real and not stylized. I mean, it's stylized, of course, but oh, there's the woman coming out of the flower that we were talking about.
Yeah.
That was
No, I
in there.
appreciate it. I drew so many feet for this comic. It was so hard. Like, I'm sure three of them are wrong, but it's like it's okay. Like but yes, I definitely learned a lot about the figure by just drawing a nude woman for like 8 years of just like becoming obsessive with the idea of it. And I think what happened more and more is I started to also give her the dimensionality of like being an actual woman rather than this like, you know, little idealized cartoonish woman that people draw. And I thought that was really important to like kind of have these like normal looking features to
Um,
just yeah.
yeah, I actually pulled up. Now you can see my whole screen, right? So you see
Oh
Rotten.
yeah, you found my Tumblr.
I found your Tumblr, and
Yeah.
but on it there's a bunch of figure drawing too
Uh-huh. Yeah, those are from
from 2017.
undergrad.
So right.
Yeah.
So this is undergrad, but even
Hmm.
still, I can really see you searching and finding what a figure does. It's really great to see these. These are from, and that I says it's a self-portrait, but I
Yeah.
wanted to your drawing.
Uh,
Um, Even that's really alive, very stylized, but um, let's see.
yeah.
That looks like more a little bit of what you were showing us. Some of your earlier sketches, the thumbnails that you were describing had a
Mhm.
stylization that sort of looked a little bit like this. It was a little flatter. It also seemed to come like it was inherited style a little bit more, where this stuff feels like you work, near as I can tell, working to sort of like figure out what you really believe and what you really see and what you really want to transmit. Um,
Yeah. Yeah, I was at SPX and Tilly Walden did this Library of Congress talk and it was awesome. And one of the things that she said that really stuck with me uh is that Tilly said sometimes the thing that you draw the best at might not be the thing you read the most. Where it's like there's some comics and things that I love that are super stylized and super like dynamic. But it wasn't something that started to naturally make sense for me. So I was like, I should just lean into the type of cartooning that I'm already doing, which is this kind of like really emotion heavy work. Like face and emotions and expressions are really important to me. But the sorts of bodies and line quality being really like light was just what came to me naturally rather than this like really thick stylized line. So it could be that too. And that really stuck with me is yeah, again, sometimes the things that you're most inspired by aren't going to be the things that you're going to draw like.
Okay. So her line, because I really want to get this down, because her line was what exactly?
Tilly said like sometimes the things you read and
Uh,
you're most inspired by are not going to be the things you'll draw or the things that you're going to be the best at drawing at. So it's
uh,
like, let's say if I really love Brian Scott Pilgrim, right? And I
mhm.
want to do those sorts of like really thick lines, stylized faces, stylized forms. But when I go to draw, I'm drawing these like kind of like, I don't know, like Nick Draceno, like uh airplane
Splatter lines. Yeah.
stylized things that are more pulled back. Maybe that is the way that I'm supposed to draw, if that makes any sense. I hope that,
It
again,
makes a
that's
lot
not
of
the,
sense.
yeah, that's not the examples that Tilly gave, but that's sort of what maybe
Mhm.
to give it some visual.
That's really hard. That's really hard for a lot of our students and for me to
It was hard for me too, because I was
say,
like, wait,
no, I
I
want to
don't
go like that, right? Yeah. So do you just like, is it just like you find some sort of method of self-love and then you just like are okay? Or because what happens is there's a lot of like unhappiness if you're not, let's say you want to draw like, well, let's say you want to draw like Tilly Walden. And
know.
you're like, I'm gonna draw like Tilly Walden as much, just try and try and try and you can't do it. And so like you start feeling lousy and lousy, lousy. So how do you
Right.
get from lousy to feeling like, oh, I can draw like I need to draw, or I can draw like the
Yeah,
person.
you can draw like you,
Yeah.
right? Like Tilly's Tilly, but like you're you and you have all your influences and ideas and line and little hand and muscles that are going to do so many different things, you know? And I think that's sort of what I came out of it is that um there is a you that's in the present that you're working with because that's your literal body and present moment and whatever is coming out of it is what's going to come out of it, right? Like as you're saying, like what you're showing right now is like this is me from 2016 to 2019 to 2024 and so much has changed and there's a part of me that can never get that line back or the ideas that I had back, but that's okay. Like there's a grace in accepting the new. And I think that also comes with the themes of the comic coincidentally, like my pain through the act of redrawing these things. Yeah, I you know, learned a lot about change through that too.
Oh, interesting. I'm trying to
But yeah, I
match.
think the page you're looking for is on that. Yeah, if you scroll
Trying
up
to match
on the right
here.
side. Yeah, if you just scroll up, I guess if you go up rather than down.
Oh, I should go. Oh,
Yeah,
that.
yeah, yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's right there.
Yeah. And then
Right.
there's matches. It's funny. I can't get my screen to participate. Let me see
No,
if
it's all good.
it's page. There we go. Um, and really, I didn't have a particular page in mind, but I just wanted to see if I could get all three images up
Sure,
there.
yeah, yeah, that is the
Um,
yep.
zoom this out.
Yeah, you can see even just like the panel.
Yeah, a
So
little
like
bit.
the ideas are somewhat the same, but
Very
yeah.
similar. It's interesting that you um held really fast to the concepts and I guess the
Mhm.
emotions and the drawings just sort of changed a little to capture them, I suppose is what happened, right?
Mhm.
There's simple ones. The cartooning, for instance, like and by that I'm defining that as like kind of the more Calvin and Hobbes inspired stuff, for instance, like this panel right here. Let's look at that one with the idea. That's a
Mhm.
great little cartoon. That's a great little cartoon. That's a great cartoon. You know,
Well, I'm
the,
glad the last one is
yeah, you
best.
nailed it with the last one. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, no, but the that this is a sillier one because you don't, this book isn't that silly, but there are moments of levity and humor, and there's a
Mhm.
lot more of it here. This one is more, it's almost more childish or childlike, I
Mhm.
should say, this version. Here
Sure.
you're losing some of that, and it's getting a little more sincere in its sort of adultness. But and then here you're playing around with just about everything.
Yeah.
Um, there are some pages I wanted to find because you did mention, oh, this is a great one because you mentioned this version.
Mhm.
Help me find it in
Sure, it's right
there it
there.
is.
Yeah. And then I tried to replicate it in the last
Oh,
one.
new
You
version is
go,
fantastic. I need to go
yeah, if you go
there.
down one there.
That, right? Look how
Mhm.
different. I noticed that when I was comparing these. Like, I love this. It's so, um, it's really just full of energy and full of, and it's really alive. This one is, there's just something mythic about that one. Um, and I found that really powerful. I found them all powerful. I was really glad to find three versions of this.
I'm glad that, yeah, I appreciate it a lot. That means a lot. Because again, I was like, the first one was on Tumblr, so you could scroll, right? So it made sense. And then when I printed it, it gets cut off awkwardly, right? Because it's like this line that randomly appears from the above the panel. But so I was like, how do I have that feeling of a hand extending out of a different panel and engaging with the other panels? So I
All
was like,
right.
let me just restructure the whole page.
Mhm.
Um, and that's sort of how the last version of it came to be, was that I couldn't have the flower stem be the hand. I was like, let me just have this like weird page that feels like all the panels are one, right?
Mhm. Um, I think I think we should definitely, I don't know if Carly's there, we should definitely entertain the idea of getting questions from people. I can keep doing this like for a while. I can be like, what about this panel? What about that
But no,
panel?
no, I mean, I'm happy, I'm glad
I
that
don't want to do
it
it
feels
too much.
sure.
But here's one that didn't change very much, like this one, which is also really, really energetic and kind of innovative in some ways. This one of this thread kind of going through.
Yeah. That
It,
one I didn't change because there was a part of me was like, Yasmeen from 2016, she nailed it. Like there wasn't much to change. Yeah, there were some that I was like, you already figured it out. I don't need to do much here. And that was one of them. The only sort of minor change that I made is that I made like a subtle thing in the last page where I put the letters D and L in Farsi, which means Del, which is like your heart and your stomach. So it's like yeah, and so because I just had the Farsi like just live with the text, and I kind of wanted the Farsi to be kind of in the image because I wanted it to be subtle.
oh.
Yeah, that someone who knew it would be like, wait, like,
Oh
um,
yeah, I totally didn't see that. Wow. Yeah. Mhm.
yeah, that was like the only subtle change I made. Was removing the Farsi, but then putting it in the image so that again, someone like the intention for the Farsi and having Persian in my work is it's meant for people who know the language to be like, oh, I get
Mhm.
it, right? There's you're talking about a del, you're not talking about a stomach, right? It's a different thing, but it doesn't have a meaning in it. There's no stomach is your stomach, right? So it has a different meaning in Farsi, but I didn't want to put the extra sort of like uh not effort, but like to say, well, stomach, paragraph, like like heart slash del, which means da, 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 like it wasn't important for me to educate someone who doesn't know that sort of language or culture. It was more of like, I'm making this work in these particular moments and intricacies for people who are from the same part of the world as that I am, so that they can feel seen and understood in a medium that I never felt like I had much representation in, besides like Marjan Satrapi.
Right,
Um,
right, right. Yeah. And you dedicate the book to, what is it, to saplings? Maybe you can remind me what
yeah, I dedicated the book at the beginning to my mom, and I wrote her name in Farsi, which is just Lily. But then at the end, I think I dedicated to saplings all plucked too early,
yeah.
um, which actually was the dedication of this
Of
of
Rotten.
Rotten. Yeah,
Um,
so I kept that.
I'll move on. I just want to like I comment on that figure, which I think, as I love all the cartooning in these first two versions, but I think that figure, there's a lot more subtlety, and maybe like there's this like pain and ecstasy at the same time in that that's not in the other ones. So I it's just another great addition. So
I appreciate it. Yeah, I think with this one in particular, because Anar is like going through it the whole time. Like the expressions are, I just wanted them to feel varied, right? I felt like in the older ones, it's just like eyes closed in pain, eyes closed in pain. I was like, okay, how do I stretch this, and how do I show different moments of like pleasure and pain, desire and disgust? Yeah.
All right. I'll stop sharing. I had
Um,
other I had other things to share, but I forget what
Tom
they.
and Yasmeen, I have one kind of question from the chat.
Sure.
But I looked through and I couldn't find any others. But if people have questions, of course, just send them
Sure.
over.
Yeah.
Jennifer said you went from heart to stomach, or the pit of the stomach, and they said they're curious about that. Can you tell us about how you went from? I was wondering about that. I was like, oh, heart to stomach. Is there anything you can tell us about that? If there's any
Sure.
meaning?
Yeah. It's again because the word in Farsi del is kind of like, it's both, like your stomach and your heart and your soul are all the same thing or connected. And I thought heart felt too, not literal, but I just kind of, I enjoyed the idea of the stomach as being this source of this suffering. Because again, like I thought also about the pain of like when you really like someone, where do you feel it? You're not like here, you're like, oh my God. No, it's your guts. Like you're like your whole body contorts towards your stomach. You're, in pain in that way, at least for me. Hopefully that's relatable. But I think that was it too. And I also found like the drawing, this like wiggly snake thing also looked like guts. So that was sort of the logic there too.
Thank you. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I can relate to the stomach thing.
Brandon's got a question. Brandon, do you want to come on and ask?
Sure.
If he's still here. Brandon. Otherwise, I'm just going to pull up the Tumblr again.
Yo, I'm here. Sorry. Can you
Go
all hear
ahead.
me?
Yeah.
I can hear you.
Okay. Love your work. That was real dope. So thank you for this presentation. So one thing that came up repeatedly was this concept of obsession, which myself and I think a lot of other people in here can relate to. And I like how unapologetic you are about it and how much you lean into it, but it's something that tends to get frowned upon, I guess, or like kind of like misunderstood, or like it gets a bad rap, especially for us creatives and whatnot. So my question is, what advantages do you think being unapologetic in your chasing of obsession has been, and have you noticed any disadvantages to it?
That's a great question, and thank you for the kind words at the beginning. It has. I'll start with the advantages. I think often, especially in the world, right, we're told how to be in a lot of ways, right? There's certain rules and constraints and all of these things that are defined for us. And for some reasons, great, and for some reasons not. But especially in art making, we have the ability to create anything, right? We can create a world that does not exist. We can create the world that does exist. And I think the amazing thing about art making is you have the liberty to create the world that you want. And the idea of me revisiting these characters and again, having this obsession with this idea was because, well, it made me happy. It made me feel really good to like redraw some of these pages and find myself being a better cartoonist and a better artist and feeling this sense of, they're like my children, right? I'm like, I'm finally getting you right, and I'm gonna do you right, and this is my book, and you're gonna go live in this book, and you're done, right? And I think maybe the obsession was, I didn't have this ultimate goal in mind of a book, right? It was just, I wanted to do it right. And I think the satisfaction and that drive, which is a lot of what art making is a drive, right? It's really hard, it's strenuous, it's really difficult. There's so many things that are maybe pushing against you. So having that drive and dedication is like what's really great about an obsession. It's unique to you. Disadvantages, it becomes like really hard to think of other things, right? Think about other ideas, think about other stories. You get really like stuck in like, I really want to get this thing right. So something that I actually would suggest is not to remove the obsession, but supplemented with other projects and ideas. So like, again, the lapse of time is like 2016 to 2019 to 2024 or 2023, you know, like around those years. I did other things. I made other pieces of work. I briefly mentioned it. I went to grad school for 2 years and I was in a visual arts interdisciplinary program where I was making fine art, like for a gallery. I had to think about things really differently. I had to think about ways to make things that weren't just drawings. I had to make objects. I made animations. I thought about how images are digested in those spaces. So it's like having supplemental obsessions so that when you go back, you have these new things to make the thing better, right? Like if we just, again, have a one-track mind of like, I want to make this story and the story's going to be like this. You're going to just keep making that story and it's going to still hit the same notes that it does. And you're not going to really go at it with a new angle if you don't bring in these other things. So ultimately, my advice is to keep what you want to do, but have the openness to try other things so that you can ultimately feed into that thing. If that helps motivate you, is like, I really want to make this story, but there's something else that I'm being told to try and work on. I really don't want to do it. But maybe if I do it, I can do that thing a lot better when I get the chance to do that real obsessive thing that I want to do. So
that makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah, great stuff. I'm gonna take that advice. Okay, does anyone else have any questions? Otherwise, we can let Yasmeen go back to the rest of her day, which I think she expected would not have an 11 o'clock call on it.
It's all fine. I appreciate it. I looked up, used a website. I was like I can't do math. I was like, what is 2 p.m.? Whatever. But yes, I'm happy to answer any questions. And you can always like message me with any questions. I'm happy to answer it. I teach comics and I love them a lot. And I think, again, from someone who has this weird background that did so many things and I never had anyone to tell me how to do things, I had to figure out how to do things on my own. And I say it to encourage anyone who's making comics so that there is no right way to make one. It's just the way that you want to make one. And that's what makes you, right? Is your voice, your desires, and yeah, all of that. So.
The bio on your website mentions a couple of other books that you've worked on. I'm trying to think. Death Bloom and Burnt. Could you talk a little bit about those?
Sure. Yeah. I when was that? 2022 did a book.
Should I do that?
Oh yeah, I can pull it up.
Oh, either one.
I can pull up here. I think if I pull up my website. Yeah, so here's Death Bloom. It's a book I did in 2022 with a press called Lucky Pocket that are based out in Baltimore, and they're amazing. And this was my first time doing like a book published by somebody else, like with they're a small press, and it was sort of describing the emotions of grief and dealing with it through the act of gardening. To actually give you some context, I lost a friend of mine who I'd known for most of my life and was dealing with the idea of grief. And when I found out that she died, I was gardening. And I watched this garden sort of like go through the cycles of life as I went through the cycles of grief. And so I made a comic about that emotion. I won an Ignatz for this one, which was awesome. That was very cool. I have a brick now. And I think the one that I put in my bio is a Blaze, which was a comic that I made here, which I think I have the whole thing up on my website. Yeah, I do. I did it for this really cool Patreon called the Wiggle Bird Mailing Club. And it's run by Michael, and I'm forgetting their last name, but Michael does a comic every month on Patreon that the people who are patrons get it mailed to them. So those were some of the more like comics I've done. And I've done a bunch of like self-published things. I do need to update my website with some of the newer things and stuff that I've self-published myself, but that was a lot of my background is self-published or doing online work or just, yeah. So I think I have most of them like on there for people to just read. Yeah.
What do you think is next for you? And because if you look at your website right there, you see like comics, animation, design, installation, you see so many things, and all we've talked about is comics mostly. So I wonder, what are you thinking about now, about next?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I teach, and I teach in a few places, and that's probably taken up a lot of my life in the past year, but I love it. With this book being done, I actually have another book that I'm going to be working on in the next year or so, which is actually my graduate thesis, which was supposed to be this animated film, but I graduated during 2020 and lost all the resources I had on campus, so I wasn't able to do a thesis. I had to write a paper of what I would do for my thesis. So I'm revisiting the thesis and making it into a comic, and I'll be doing that with Secret Room Press based in Portland, and they're awesome. So it'll be like a risograph comic, kind of like how Death Bloom was, because I love the risograph. I do so much with the risograph, and so to do another comic with the risograph is a great return for me. But yeah, I do long for sort of the installation stuff as well. It's just I don't have a studio or the capacity I used to have in grad school. Yeah, that definitely limits things that I can do in terms of that. But
makes sense. I love this little animation. I really stricken by all the work on your site and just how all the multidisciplinary stuff.
Well, I appreciate it.
I watch loops like this forever. Mahor's got one last question. Mahor, do you want to come on mic and ask that, and then we'll let Yasmeen go.
I don't know if you can hear me.
Yeah.
Hi, Yasmeen. So this might be something that you've answered before, but I was curious about why a pomegranate, why an ananas? Because, you know, I'm just curious because it has a lot of significant symbolism in Persian mythology, in literature. It has a lot of meanings. It has been used in many ways. And I'm just really curious, did the character just came to you like that, or was it something that you chose because of the meaning behind it?
It definitely is what you just said. It was just the meaning. Like it felt like the most symbolic fruit. Like I really wanted to make a character that was a fruit, and that was the fruit that had the most meaning because of its significance culturally. But I also thought about it as a actual thing. It's such a weird fruit, right? Like you tear it open, it has a bunch of little seeds, and you like pluck them out, and then they bleed and they're red, and then the flowers themselves are these like fibrous thick things that then the flower themselves becomes the tip of the pomegranate. It has so much like sort of like erotic nature to it. Like it looks like a little boob, you know, like there's so much that's so weird about it that were my own sort of fascinations with it. And then I also, again, it was just something that came up again and again and again in Persian poetry and just any sort of like Islamic poetry that had that used as the thing of beauty, right? I also, like some people have said, like in the stories of Adam and Eve in the Quran, which is also in the Bible, they were eating a pomegranate instead of an apple, right? Like there's it just felt like something that felt historical. It had a significance. It just wouldn't, I think, hit the same if it was like an apple or like a cucumber,
Yeah,
right? It just felt like the right thing.
I guess it speaks to the right, you know, the right people differently. I don't know if that's the correct way
Yeah.
to say it, but yeah, I know. Thank you so much.
Yeah. I totally resonate with that, because some people are like, oh, are you inspired by Persephone? And I'm like,
No.
like that's not what I grew up with, right? But it has so much significance for so many different people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All
I
right.
do see,
Thank you.
I don't want to keep anyone, but I do see one more question
From Jason. Can you talk? Sure. Jason can ask it, or it's a short one. Can you talk about community like San Francisco zine scene?
Sure. I can definitely talk about that. I love to talk about that. It's great. So I grew up in the Bay Area. I grew up in San Jose, and I went to grad school in upstate New York, and then I came back and I started a job at Silver Sprocket in the mail order department. I just was at the shop. And I met my two peers, Daniel and Raul, who I have a collective with now. And it became this like amazing part of my life where I moved here again as an adult and met so many people. There's so many people here who are so caring and eager. And just again, San Francisco has this history of underground comics that ebbs and flows, right? And it is really hard to live here because of rent and all of these things that are, really special to the Bay Area in terms of like tech, all of this, right? But because all of those things exist, the people that live here care a lot, and they're really present, and they just like show up. Like they really want to just be there for you and support you. Silver Sprocket being here is like a big part of the community of like having a community space, having a bookstore, having people that come through there. And it's people, bring their zines to the shop and they put on consignment. There's a space to do that here. I also, CCA is here, which is where I teach, California College of the Arts, that has a comics MFA and BFA. And it's sort of brings a bunch of cartoonists during the summer, and some of the cartoonists stay during the year, bringing new cartoonists in the city. And also above us is the Schultz Museum, Dr. Schultz. And again, there's all these little things that happen. The East Bay has a bunch of like risograph sort of studios that people can use as community access spaces, like Tiny Splendor. Like there's things happening, and there's a lot of cartoonists here, and they just care a lot for one another. So I do feel like the scene ebbs and flows, right? And it really depends on a few people for sure, because if one person doesn't have this thing or one person doesn't have this space, things change a lot. But I care a lot about highlighting that and making sure that people know that's on the scene. And again, it's totally my bias, but whenever I do any events in the Bay Area, I just have such a great time, because it just feels like everyone just has this really great energy to them. And again, a lot of care, and it just feels like a big family to me.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for that.
Yeah.
I was really curious. My son said he shares some peeps with you in San Francisco, in the art community.
Yeah. Oh, I see. Oh, yeah. Julia doesn't live here. Julia lives in LA, but Julia's awesome. I love Julia. I went on a residency with Julia in April at Trailer Blaze, but Julia's great. Yeah.
I noticed that she got first place in one of the editors picks in a recent contest, or whatever you call it, that some of our people actually got the next two placements. And I'm sorry if you probably can't hear me very well. I'm in chemotherapy right now. I didn't want to miss your talk. It was really great.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, thanks, Yasmeen. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I'm just going to ask, let's see, I'm going to put that link one more time for the book in the chat. I'm also going to put a link to the upcoming courses. That's the last I'm going to put anything in the chat. Let's all give Yasmeen a round of applause and go buy that book. It's really beautiful. There's so much it's so multi-layered, and that's the thing, and so sensual, and so there's just a lot going on in that book. I really think everybody should check it out. All right, give Yasmeen a round of applause. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you.
Yasmeen.
Really
Nobody's
appreciate it.
applauding. Yeah,
Thank you, Yasmeen. That was great.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Presentation.
Good luck with the book.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Yasmeen. It was great.
Bye-bye. Yay. Thanks for joining us. This has been a production of the Sequential Artists Workshop, or SAW. You can find us on social media at Comics Workshop and online at sawcomics.org. You can hear about our many courses at learn.sawcomics.org. SAW is a nonprofit and supported by people like you. Learn how to make a tax-deductible donation at the donate page of sawcomics.org. You can join our free community of comics explorers at members.sawcomics.org. Thanks so much for being here.